Welcome students to another episode of Women of FHSS. Today joining us, we have one of our former BYU graduates in anthropology, Sydney Mogotsi. Sydney, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Well, Sydney, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you are currently doing?
Sure. So I'm a BYU alum. I graduated from BYU, did anthropology. I joined the Peace Corps shortly after graduating. I served in Botswana for 2 years, and I met my husband in South Africa. We stayed in South Africa for 4 years and then moved to Salt Lake about 5 years ago, and I was working at a refugee resettlement agency in Salt Lake, and now I work for the church for LDS Charities. I oversee their refugee resettlement funding portfolio for the US.
Wow, that's amazing. Did you ever think that this is where you would end up?
I don't think I saw myself coming back to Utah. I kind of had a globetrotter sensibility, and my husband's from South Africa, so I was happy to settle internationally for a while, but having kids and being close to family has definitely been enticing for having a family. And I definitely feel privileged to be able to work at the church with their humanitarian efforts. I had an experience, and this is probably a little bit cheesy, but while I was in the Peace Corps, I was in the very rural part of the country in the Kalahari Desert, 3,000, a village of 3,000, and I was working at a clinic, and then one day there was a truck that came in and unloaded a bunch of wheelchairs, and they had Latter-day Saint Charities on the back of them. And I'm like, how am I in the middle of nowhere, and I am seeing this, sort of humanitarian effort of the church? And I was like, it would be so great to be able to work for an organization like that has that kind of reach. And so, yeah, definitely feel privileged to be able to be here in my home state, and then also be working for this organization that is doing work like that. Yeah.
And that's so amazing. I feel like when I talk with students, because I'm over students in the liberal arts, so I have a lot of students that are very inclined to do development, right? And so you're working in a space where students ask me all the time, who do you know? Who do you know? How can I work there? And so what an amazing opportunity. And I can't wait to hear and glean from you. And I can't wait for our students to glean from you experiences that helped you to get to a space where you were qualified for that kind of work.
Yeah.
And so I was hoping we could maybe start with that. What were some things that you wish you would have known in your undergraduate studies? Let's maybe start then, and then we can dive into some of these other questions.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I hadn't. I think I got caught up in like, what is my major? What am I going to study? What is my concentration? It's going to destroy my life. Like this decision I make is everything. And, with some distance, you realize it wasn't really everything. Anthropology, I'm not an anthropologist, right? I studied anthropology, but I didn't necessarily go into that field. But the skills and the theory and the lessons I learned from anthropology have definitely helped me in my field. But there's a lot of other things also, like if I had done sociology, if I had done economics, if I had even done a language course or something, all of those things I think would have benefited in my field. And so one thing I feel like I could have used was like a little bit more relaxation around the pressure to figure out my major, and knowing that like sometimes the experiences we have later on are out of our own making, and our own connections that we're making, not necessarily the field that think we're going into. The other thing, since we are liberal arts, you know, obviously I studied anthropology, so I was like, oh, well, qualitative, it's just the best, you know, I don't have a data mind, but I have really come to appreciate data and biostatistics and data analytics in a way that I definitely underappreciated or didn't build myself up for as an undergrad. So I feel like I put that limitation on myself.
And I think that that is huge, right? As an advisor, I can attest to the value of having those technical skills, but how great of an opportunity you've had to learn that in your job too.
Yes, yeah.
Right. And with people who I'm sure were really patient while you were learning those things as well. But I think that that's so important for our students to know too.
Yes, I agree. I think there's sometimes a fear that you'll be unqualified, but there's so much on the job training that happens, so much skill building that happens while you're employed that make up for some of that.
So seniors, listen up. So it's the world is not over if you don't have that. It's nice if you can build that into your schedule, but the world is not over.
Yeah, there are other opportunities to learn for sure.
So speaking of other opportunities, what other activities or education has prepared you the most for the roles that you've had? I mean, it sounds like you've had some incredible experiences. So what other things helped you?
I mean, I think, as I've mentioned previously, like being in the Peace Corps was a really big learning experience for me. It's not, I mean, it's a volunteer role. It's 2 years volunteered, although you are given a stipend. But I would consider it like a professional volunteer. That was a really big, yeah, I think stepping stone for me to be able to be involved in international development, to have the experience to say, I lived in a foreign country, I worked on programs that were on the ground, I helped do program design, helped do monitoring and evaluation for these programs. I really feel like gave me a leg up in what can be a pretty competitive field. I I did a master's in migration and displacement at a university in South Africa. I feel I'm currently doing my MPH, so I feel like I'm always looking for opportunities to continue learning and growing in a field that is rapidly changing, and is also, you know, there's a lot of desire to be on this end as well. So obviously there's educational experiences, but I think these other experiences like volunteering, certificate programs, they can go a long way as well.
I love that. I love that as you engage with more opportunities, it's almost like things that you hadn't thought about before start to open up for you. So I feel like sometimes our students have, you know, a kind of tunnel vision, right? And I think that that's not just our students. I think that's just students collectively. So I want to be clear. And I know I did when I was a student. I had a very tunnel vision about this is what my life is going to look like after I graduate, and it's going to look this way. And then when you experience different things, it's amazing how that expands your vision.
Yeah, I mean, so I've worked with refugees for over a decade, but I couldn't have known when I was graduating that that's the population I'd be working with. But it makes sense now. It's like, okay, anthropology is the study of peoples and cultures. Refugees are in this interesting place culturally where they're combined with a lot of people that have been displaced from their home and are interacting with others from a third culture. And so theoretically, it's like, oh yes, anthropology is a good background to be able to work with a population like that. But I didn't know that graduating, you know, I didn't know that I was going to be set up to be able to understand, or at least try to grapple with understanding that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So in the work that you have done in the past up to where you are now, can you tell us a little bit about the networking opportunities that you had? Did you obtain this or any earlier position through networking? What's the value of that?
Yeah, I wish networking weren't so important. I think it can be really challenging. I think it can be hard to approach people you don't know and ask for information. Have your list of people that you contact. It can be really challenging, but it has been my career for sure. I mean, like looking at an organization, saying, well, I want to work for this organization. They have a position that's open. Do I know anyone on LinkedIn that works there? And lo and behold, I knew someone and I reached out to them. And that's not how I got the job, but it's how I got interviewed, like it's how my name came up for an interview, was knowing someone and being able to make sure that they see my resume. And yeah, I think I definitely wish it weren't as important as it is, but it is. And it, even I think with this current position, I had an informational interview with someone at LDS Charities like 2 years earlier. And so when this position did come up and I applied for it, I was able to reach back out to that person, even though at the time there was nothing for me, and just say, hey, remember, remember me, remember we talked while I'd applied for this position. And I think that helped, but obviously it's not everything, but it's more important than I want it to be, for sure.
Absolutely. And I know that when I'm talking, I have a very similar experience as well. When I'm talking with students, it's almost like you have to build this into your life,
Mhm.
right? Because I think otherwise opportunities pass you by because you haven't been having those conversations.
Yes. Yeah.
Was it organic, the one that you had the information? Was it an organic conversation or was it one that you had sought out?
No, I had sought it out. It was an organization I was interested in being a part of, and asking, what can I do to qualify myself for, what sort of things should I be looking for to build my own resume. And then yeah, and then it happened that a couple of years later I was able to be qualified for it. So
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing some of the kind of tips and tricks
yeah.
for some of our women students who are looking at careers after they graduate. Speaking of your kind of life trajectory, and it's not one that I typically hear. Maybe it's happening a lot more, but the fact that you left and you found your partner and you have children and you're working and you're feeling really fulfilled in that role. What things have you had to grapple with, either personally or professionally, at different stages in your career?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I thought of a couple of things. When we first got married, we were living in South Africa, and it was new. It was it, I'd been living in Botswana, but now I was in South Africa, and my husband was working full time, and it was really difficult in terms of like a cultural dynamic and having to figure out who I was in this marriage and in this new country. And I had enrolled in grad school, and I eventually started, and that really helped me, really saved me a bit from, and helped me like navigate a new society. I had studied forced migration, and so a lot of the people that were in my cohort were also like immigrants or people that weren't from South Africa. And so it was a really nice way to build my social network, build a professional network, without, kind of, I don't know, it just helped a lot in adjusting myself into a new country. Another example that I was thinking of was when we first moved back to the US. I hadn't been working for about a year and a half. And so we put my son in daycare, and my husband was doing school during the day and then working at night. And so I started working the first time with a kid, with a child, and it was so overwhelming, especially because my husband was working at night. I would come home and I'd do all the mom stuff, cook, get them a bath, put them to bed. And it was just, I was exhausted. And I also was working with refugees. And it was really taxing, like emotionally. I felt both things were really taxing. And it was stressing me out. So I wanted to find something that would bring me some joy that didn't have to do with my family and didn't have to do with my professional career. And I've always loved to sing. I've always liked being in a choir. And so I joined a community choir, and it meant I had to find childcare like once a week at night so I could be part of this choir. But it was lovely. It was such a beautiful experience. To be able to have this thing that was for me where I could sing and there was no compensation like attached to it. There was no reward. It was just like the feeling of singing out loud with a group of people that also loved to sing for, no aspirations attached to it. And that was something that was like really joyful for me in this time that I felt like just stretched to my limits. And that's definitely something that probably stretched me a little bit more, but also brought me joy. And I have seen that with like peers and others that are looking for joy, because you can't necessarily find joy at work. I mean, work is work, right? It's the daily grind. It can be rewarding, but it can also be a headache. And your family is wonderful, but they can't also be everything. And so finding those pieces of joy was like a real important thing for me. And yeah, something that I try to remember as I keep progressing in our journey.
Did you feel at first when you were seeking opportunities for joy outside of your family and outside of work, did you feel guilt?
No, I mean, no, I don't think so. I think I felt like I was putting my all into both. And so it was at the encouragement of a friend. And so it felt like, okay, this is something I need, and it will make me better at both things. So yeah, I don't think I felt much guilt because I needed it.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I find often when I'm talking with colleagues or when I'm talking with friends that seems to be a typical response.
Yeah.
Is this idea of, is there an identity outside of my family? Is there an identity outside of my profession that is worth seeking? And so I'm really glad that you didn't have that, because I do think that is something that's troubling for others, maybe in similar situations.
Yes.
Do you feel that way at all?
No, definitely. I've definitely heard that from peers and from, friends who have gone back to work later in life, feeling like that. I think, early on, knowing that I was going to have a career and not be able to stay at home, I think it helped just shift my perspective. Some of it is a matter of survival, right? Like in this day and age, relying on a 2-income household is pretty standard and, kind of important. And so knowing that like I'm doing this for the welfare of my children, and because it's what I need to do to take care of myself and my family, maybe I suppressed guilt that way, but I've definitely tried not to fall into that trap, because we don't need it. We don't need any of that.
You're right. We don't need that. And so I'm really glad that we've been able to talk through that a little bit for those who are listening who might be struggling with embracing other parts of themselves. So thank you for that. In fact, the next question I have is there anything that you feel would empower our women students to pursue whatever it is that they choose post-graduation, whether it's fulfilling grad school, stay-at-home opportunities, part-time or full-time opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, one lesson that I've learned, because I've been able to do a grad program in my 20s and then also in my 30s, 30s is that school gets easier. For some reason, doing a master's program in my 30s has been really nice. Like I feel I'm a better student. I know what's expected of me better. I get better grades. I'm not distracted. I know what I want. And that's been a really wonderful lesson to learn that like I'm actually a really good student. Maybe I wasn't when I was 19, 20, but you know, even if we've been out of the workplace, even if we've been out of college for a while, our capacity to learn and to be a student doesn't necessarily diminish over time. And so I love to see women going back to school later in life, because I just think they're going to enjoy it more also, because you know what you want a little bit more. So that's been a really lovely lesson that I've learned as I've gotten older, that I've just gotten smarter. That's a nice thing. A nice thing to remember. I think, you know, also working in nonprofit, there are so many good opportunities to work with organizations within our communities that are not always paid, that are part-time, that are volunteer, that you know, that are still worthwhile and good opportunities. And I've seen that from working with community members in different things. And so I think even if women are choosing to stay at home, if they're able to, you know, there's still lots of ways to be involved and to provide like a positive impact. And again, going to school later on in life is also great. It's awesome.
That is so encouraging. I know a lot of the students that we're seeing come back to campus are untraditional students. They are older, and I think that they would get great value in knowing that being a lifelong learner is definitely something that we're excited about.
Yeah.
And you've proven that with the fact that you're continuing to go back to school.
Yeah, crazy, but it's fine.
Is there anything else that you would want to leave with our students who might be listening to this later?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that a career can be very fulfilling. It can give you a sense of autonomy. You know, obviously there's the things that just come with being able to work and provide for your family, and the sense of pride for yourself, to increase your earning potential. Those are all like really fun and rewarding things that can come from having a career. I know that sometimes, depending on how we were raised, there can be like a sense of disappointment and realizing that you do have to work to you know, take care of yourself or take care of your family, which I know can be difficult, but like we also need more women in our workplaces. We need more representation. We need the voice of women to be able to, you know, better take care of what's going on out there. So I love to see it. I love to see more and more women coming into, you know, the workplace at church, and out in the community as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Cindy, for your time. I'm so excited to post this, and I really just appreciate the insight that you've been able to give, particularly as it comes to all these roles that women can have, and how it's very individualized, you know, to each experience. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's great to meet you.